Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast, and we are finally doing it. We're talking about the man that George calls the best central centre back prospect on the market. It's incredibly but George says he's the best central centre back prospect on the market. If you've ever listened to the Cannon podcast, this is a player we've spoken about a lot. We've just done some scouting with him. We did an hour. We did a lot of scouting on this time. A lot of clips looking at loads and loads of stuff. His passing, his aerial duels, his dual capacity, 1v1s, everything. So it was really good. You can check that out from the link below for free if you'd like to. But we are here to talk. We want to talk the deal. We want to look at his stats.
Mhm.
We want to look at the tactics board and look at some stuff that we spoke about in the scouting. We want to talk about the deal, etc., etc. So yeah, let's get into it. I can't believe you wouldn't know who he is, but Ousmane Diomande, if you don't know, is a 20-year-old centre-back who is 21 in December, and he's 20 until he turns 21, because that's how it works. Plays for Sporting. Ivory Coast international, supposedly release clause of 80 million euros, 6'3". Transfer market has it down as he's had 0 injuries, which is for an Arsenal player, is quite potential Arsenal player, is quite exciting.
Also 20.
Caveat there. Contract to 2027. He's right-footed and has played all across Sporting's back three. Hasn't been a nailed-on starter this year, but has been in the past. I think you mentioned earlier, Amarim's changed his system.
Mhm.
Very, very quickly, people who don't know Diomande at all, you've said he is a kind of Upamecano-esque player. Just talk through his profile sort of overall before we get into him specifically.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think with Upamecano you associate a level of uncontrolled aggression, whereas Diomande
Where have
thrives
we
on
seen
it.
that?
And I think the Upamecano comparison comes a lot more for his in possession work and his ability to manipulate the ball in terms of his ability to accelerate tempo, in terms of his touch economy, the way that he's able to really decide when to speed up play, when to drive and take responsibility, his passing range, and the way that he brushes balls. It's very disguised, which just means that he's able to reverse balls into midfield really beautifully and be able to sell the pass so that the opposition doesn't know where it's going. So he's got a lot of those Upamecano in possession qualities, and I would make a lot of comparisons with William Saliba in terms of his ability to deal with 1v1 situations, in terms of his controlled aggression in wide spaces. It's really, really quite similar. And actually, a lot of the weaknesses that we talk about in terms of his dealing of aerial balls from wide or whipped crosses in is something that he does struggle with, as well as at times, I think, being overconfident in his own ability. It can lead to some pretty easy mistakes that I think Saliba had quite a bit of when he first entered the Arsenal first team. And so there's a bit of experience there that he does. But as a prospect, 6'3", incredibly solid as a physical profile, beautiful acceleration, and his decision when to accelerate to meet people in the channels is absolutely incredible. Like, you're gonna find times when he shuttles and then he immediately accelerates the moment the ball is lost from the opposition, and that's the controlled aggression definition that when we talk about, that's really needed at the top level. He's got it in spades. So yeah, a cross between Upamecano and Saliba.
High praise. Yeah, we saw it in the
High
clips.
praise.
There's stuff to work on in terms of his aerial duels. And I think there's, especially when he's pulled wide, or maybe when he's coming out from wide, there's some question marks. I think you also picked out. Honestly, I'm genuinely, I know how clever George is. He surprised even me with the pick out of Diomande in terms of how he deals with balls in the air that are coming straight at him. He's fine. But when they're whipped in from the side, it's the only time he panics, and it's an unbelievable pick out. So yeah, we had a look at that. But yeah, it's a really interesting player, interesting prospect. I want to have a look at his numbers just before we go to the tactics board, and obviously we will talk about the deal and how it all sort of fits in as well. But I think the numbers kind of back up really sort of what we were saying in terms of his profile. Huge caveat on these. These are FPRF's numbers against centre backs, but they're against the next best 14 leagues. So I think because he's in the Portuguese league, it's not the top 5 leagues. Let me just absolutely check that, because I don't want to say it. Yes, men's next 14 competitions. I was just want to check that. So yeah, there's a lot of these numbers look really, really good in terms of the progressive carries and progressive passes.
Which is fair to the level, I would say.
Which is fair to the level. And also, he's playing for one of the best teams in Portugal, so I think we have to be putting a lot of caveats. However, there's a couple of numbers that I want to have a look at. I mean, even with those caveats, the passing numbers look really, really healthy. And specifically the pass completion long. Something I love with Diomande is the fade he gets on the pitch. Is that what you call it? The fade on the passing?
Mm-hmm.
The sort of, I think with someone that big and someone who uh, sort of maybe looks so sort of composed and strong, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'd expect someone who's firing balls, sort of raking passes out. Actually, the subtlety in his passing, I was really impressed with in terms of how he can sort of drop it on
Culture.
you. The culture, yeah, it's and maybe that's just my assumption of the player, and yeah, it's probably on me. But I think what I was impressed with is how calm he was and how sort of subtle the passing was from long, which was really, really nice. So as the pass into the final third, again, you have to take in the caveats, but you can see someone who is very, very progressive. There's a couple of other stats I wanted to show. Where was it? An exciting number of tackles in the attacking third. I think in terms of keeping us high, a centre back who can sit high and defend over the shoulder, which he can, is really, really exciting. As you can see, the numbers, obviously the tackles all over, but tackles in the attacking third is particularly strong. Obviously, you've got to add the caveats, but he's in there. And then also the touches as well. This is a very high touch player. These are the numbers that, Saliba and Gabriella are kind of looking at in terms of touches. So he's heavily involved in games. Passes received as well, high numbers in terms of how much Diomande is involved in build up. He has been changed in his, I mentioned it earlier, changed in his role from Amorim this season and put more out wide. Am I correct in saying?
Yeah, more in a right center back that has that ability to be a little bit wider, almost very Ben White in role in terms of what he's asked to do. I think a lot of things that you'll notice with Diomande, though, wide and touch line, are things that he's not as comfortable with. He has the versatility to do it, and I think it's incredible that Amorim trusts a youngster that young to basically be something that he's not. It says a lot to the player, but it is worth noting that when he's static in wide positions, his defending is a little bit less hurried and it's a little bit less authoritative. Whereas if he's a central center back and he's arriving into those wide zones, that's something that he thrives on. And he thrives on his ability to control those situations. But again, even in terms of defending those from wide areas, it's another wide is something that he struggles static. It doesn't struggle when he's arriving into the channels. And that's a really important distinction, because if you're worried about him basically being Ben White, it's not the case. I think that he's a really good, strong 1v1 defender in the channels. The trouble is if he's already touchline, and I think that he has to be aggressive in terms of meeting his opposing winger or even the opposing fullback, that's something that he can maybe struggle a little bit in. But in terms of being a proper central center back, that's probably his best position, but he's got versatility all across the back line, and we'll go into kind of how we see that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see his disciplinary record there at the end in terms of yellows and reds, and there is a level of calmness that's really, really nice. Let's come on to, you wanted to talk about four things on the tactics board. As you bring that up, I'll sort of preface that. So we wanted to talk about his versatility in terms of the positions he can play across the back line as we see it. We want to talk about how he deals with aerial duels, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. We want to talk about his acceleration and his tempo, and we also want to talk about his passing. So this is possibly how Diomande fits into an Arsenal system in terms of from a tactical perspective.
Right. And so we'll I've got Diomande kind of down in the corner here, and really quickly.
You've got 12 players, George.
Yes, we've got
you don't
12
know ball.
players. in terms of Diamande's ability, you absolutely could have him as the Ben White. He's fine in terms of being the right center back. I actually think this is the best way to use him in terms of having another midfielder like a Thomas Partey or a Yusuf Fofana kind of in that right half space that allows a 10 to go across the kind of front line, because it then stops Diomande from basically being here, which is where I don't think that he's at his best in terms of defending. But if he's
on the clips, that was where he was making the most mistakes, right?
Right. And if he's receiving passes here, which, by the way, he's beautiful at, he's got a brilliant long raking ball. He can find disguised passes into midfield, or he can also pass to the winger. What's really important here is he's got a beautiful technical empathy, which is just, the Arsene Wenger term in terms of him being able to pass to a winger's strong foot.
Speak English.
There was multiple times in clips that we saw, like, you might have a pressure from an opposition winger that's coming against your opposition winger, and Diomande sends a message with his passing in terms of opening around wide, or kind of asking him to take the pass wide, whereas the winger doesn't quite do it. But you could see in a better system with better players that that understanding would be really, really well received. But I think ultimately as well, one of his best qualities is going to be that central center back mold. He offers you that huge versatility in that zone. But something also that he can do is, you can also even take away Gabriel in this instance. And he is perfectly capable being a versatile option in terms of at left center back as well. He
And
doesn't
just
have an angle bias as well, so I don't think that you're going to lose much of the angles if people are worried about that. And he's got a brilliant ability to meet out wide and have that role. But you do have kind of a back line now of almost 6'3", elite ball players and press baiters that can play across the back line. But I don't think, I think his best position is central center back personally for me. And so if you were to see something down the line, you could absolutely see something like this occur.
Yeah. We'll come on to this when we talk about the deal, but I think in terms of that comfortability, again, as you say, maybe not the best centre back prospect in the world, but as a central centre back, the middle of a three, he looks so comfortable, and that is probably the one position that we're looking at from a deal perspective and going, do we have enough cover there? If Saliba drops out, yes, okay, we've got right-sided defenders and that sort of stuff, but someone who can sit there as the sort of let's call it the quarterback in the three and do that job. I think Diomande is really really suitable for that.
Absolutely. And one thing that we could also see, just as a little tweak, is let's say that we've got our three here and Saliba's able to play. One thing that I think Diomande could give you, and let's assume Timber allows us to go out wide. I don't think this is natural for Timber. You probably need a different profile, but this idea about having a center back that's able to invert into midfield is something that we can see. Very, very possible. So that John Stone's kind of inverted center back coming in from deep, being kind of that libero, is something that he has the flexibility for. And he does have DM versatility in terms of potentially down the line. I think that's something that we've got to eke out and adapt and build a little bit more. But he absolutely has that inverted center back mold where if you're coming up, you can receive much in the same way that, Pep uses John Stone. So he's got that ability about him as well. I think primarily, though, you're looking at a player who, along with kind of William Saliba, offers you that orchestrator and build-up quality, right? And if Saliba's not able to play, who, by the way, played every single minute for Arsenal, which is not something I love saying, it's nice to have an option down that right flank who's perfectly capable being a central center back or also being kind of the right center back and allowing, Saliba to play as well. We can give Ben White rest as well. There's clearly opportunity. I do think it puts a little bit more emphasis though on us maybe not necessarily having a Partey in that case, but having an Emile Smith Rowe doing that, because again, I don't find him.
You and your capitals.
Me and my capitals. But I think he's somebody that's brilliant in terms of meeting up. We could definitely see a switch to a 2-3 here. The problem is, I think for me, is that I don't love him in wide zones, and his crossing variety, I think, is not something that's as developed right now. He's definitely somebody that you see a lot of disguise passes in the middle. He can play balls into that zone 14 area, but in terms of delivering a variety of cross, that's not really something he has. So maybe the right central midfielder may need to provide the overlap to get Saka inside, and then he can find them. He can find them brilliantly there, but it places maybe a little bit of a different tweak in the Ben White role. I mean, he can do it, but he is going to have a little bit of weaknesses there.
Yep. I think something we picked out in the clips, which I really really like, is his first touch and how it gives himself options and how sort of how smart he is with that, which I really really like, and I think especially as an orchestrator and build up, that's going to be a massive help in there. Let's move forward to the deal then. So we can love the player and we can love what he might bring us. And I think in many ways, this plugs a gap for Arsenal in terms of that central centre-back cover, someone who can, we may feel we've got a lot of defenders, but I know we joke about it, but Cedric going is a body, and also Tomiyasu's fitness concerns. we could be in a situation where Ben White's playing every single game and Saliba's playing every single game again. I don't love that, and actually, I like Tomiyasu as an option on the left hand side as well in certain games as well. So I don't know. I do feel if we're gonna look, especially if we get a deal done for Jarrell Hato, or if Kivior stays around, if Zinchenko stays around, I do think the right side of the defense, or someone who is, I know he can go on the left in a three as well, but I think someone who's maybe more comfortable that side is suitable. At 67 million or 80 million euros, but about 67 million sterling. Does that represent value to you, and does that represent what Arsenal need to do in terms of in the defence this summer as a jigsaw as well of the whole squad?
It represents value for the player and what you're buying. Does it represent value for what Arsenal need in terms of its priorities and the proper fund allocation? That is a question mark. It's a lot of money, and there's no hiding away from it. I mean, he's completely worth it. I think comparable mates in terms of letting Euro are going for similar in terms of 55 million pounds, 60 million pounds. That's likely the fee that they're going to be commanding as well. And so he's not out of line or more expensive or out of value than what his quality and his claim of being the best central center back prospect in the world deserves. But again, I think Arsenal's decision in terms of that, they'd have to make a decision on Tomiyasu for me. And I think I'm looking at Zinchenko, Jakub Kivior, and Tomiyasu all in the next 2 years as, are you 100% staying with the team? And I think that 2 buys can replace that. You can get a Jarrell Hato type of player as well as a Diomande, and you replace those 3 players eventually in terms of defensive depth. And I think that that's something that I would like to look towards to achieve, but I don't think that we can buy a player without seeing a departure here, because I don't think you can keep Tomiyasu, Gabriel, Saliba, Diomande, Kivior, Tomiyasu all happy, and I don't even think that makes sense if I'm really being fair in terms of fund allocation. The one thing that I struggle with, but the one thing that I struggle with is, this is a team that lacks really a Saliba backup, and Diomande is that. I think that Tomiyasu can do those things, but I don't trust him to be fit. I really don't. I don't trust his ability to really be a proper solution in that mold. I think he can do the role because he's incredibly two-footed and he's incredibly smart. But again, in terms of the press baiting and the culture on the ball, it is a different level with Diomande. You do completely get that. And by the way, he is a player that I don't think guarantees Gabriel a place in the team. He absolutely needs multiple years of experience, adaptation, and room to grow, but he will compete with Gabriel, and he will compete for a starting spot. This isn't a player that you buy just for depth, by the way, and just for a backup. He is a type of player that you could see forcing himself into the starting 11. So again, you need to ask yourself, with what we need to do this summer, is 69 million pounds of an available 250 million pounds worth it? Are you spending over a quarter of your budget on a central center back? Is that something that you're really dying for? I think it's a whole, but it's something that I struggle with because I don't think it fixes the left-hand side fluidity. I don't think that it fixes our transitional inevitability in the forward line, which are my 2 biggest concerns heading into next season to fix the mid-block. Now, next among those is Saliba backup, but I also can't be greedy. So I will end on this. The best player for the role is Diomande. I question whether or not 69 million pounds is a good fund allocation in a summer where we may need higher priorities. And I'm just hoping that no one gets him so that I can get him next year.
Yeah, it's a jigsaw signing, isn't it? It's not a it's kind of if it fits. I think it's a very I strongly believe Arsenal are going to spend big this summer. So I think there's a world in which that Diomande can happen and we can go and do everything else. I know you said 250 million pounds there. I believe that's the sort of money we're going to go and spend. And I think with that, you can do something in the midfield. You can get Diomande. You can get your, especially with sales as well, in terms of a net spend. You can go. I genuinely believe we can go and do that. And also improve the attack. So I think feasibly it's there. Do I think it's absolute number one priority? We have to do this. No, but equally, does that mean we don't have to do it? No. So for me, it's a jigsaw signing, similar to the midfield. I think the forward areas are the only areas where I think that is a non-negotiable. There's no jigsaw there. You just need to go and do what you need to do. And then looking further back through the pitch, you're starting to go, can we get that overlapping left back profile? How do we do that? Is that definitely something we want? Or, the second goalkeeper is going to be dependent on sales. Midfield is more dependent on sales for me. So it's an interesting one. I do want to say this before we get to the questions. I said this on the scouting as well. This is a player and a name that is very obvious and very kind of has been the name for a while. You know more players than me, and you understand the sort of the market in terms of what's out there for centre backs better than me. In terms of other profiles that could go in and do that, are there other options, or is he just streets away in terms of especially as a central centre back, someone who can orchestrate build up in that way? Because we have to be specific about what we're looking for. We're not just looking for a centre back. We're looking for someone who can come and do that role behind Saliba and potentially, in the future go and take that. And I do think personally, when he comes in, he might be okay with 20 appearances, 25 appearances. He's just had that for Sporting. So I think, it's not a world where he has to come in and replace everyone now. And it could be really good. But yeah, in terms of what's on the market, do you think this is the best option? And what are the other options?
There's Lenny Euro in terms of a comparable ceiling. But again, as I've said in the scouting, and I'd urge everybody to, if they'd like a lot more deep dive into actual physical clips, to go check that out and support the channel. We love that. But he's got the physical tools, Lenny Euro. Does he have the same technical accomplishment and culture on the ball that a Diomande does? He doesn't. And I think what makes it so special is that Diomande has what seems like the complete package. There are physical aggressive tools in terms of his controlled aggression in wide spaces that you love from a Saliba, but then he adds the culture that you love from Saliba, and then he adds, his versatility across the front line, the back line rather, that I think Saliba has. But I would even argue Diomande is even more versatile than Saliba.
So, yeah.
And so, yeah, he's expensive, but he's the best. That's package.
That's what's up. I also think, to raise the floor of one of arguably the best defense in Europe, yes, it's going to cost money. Question is, do you want to go and do that? That it's going to cost money. Those are the questions. And the thing is, and let us know what you think in the comments. I think there's an argument for and an argument against, but I think sometimes people go 60, 80 million euros to sit on the bench. Well, firstly, he's not going to sit on the bench, is he? Secondly, we're hoping long term that this is a player who can come in and look. We win either way. Either he usurps someone in the team and we can make a really big sale that benefits all of us. At the moment, we can't see that happening, but who knows? We didn't see Ben White becoming a right back. Who knows? Or he plays a lot and we can sell him further down the line for probably a similar price, and he's coming in and supported us and raised the floor of our team. Again, I bring it back to this. We are still in that mindset, I feel, of competing for fourth, competing for getting into Europe and competing with Chelsea and
this
United.
Is a Real Madrid thing to do.
It's a very Real Madrid thing to do.
With Tchouaméni, with Valverde, buying Arda Güler with Modric and Toni Kroos.
Buying Mbappe with Vinny and Rodri. Like this is the thing. And so we have to get comfortable doing these types of things. Whether we should do this one, ? And, that's, I think, as I say, it's a jigsaw. But yeah. Let's come to some questions. One from Toby2332 _ on X. Some negatives would be nice. Sporting fans don't seem too upset he'll be sold. And yeah, someone else was mentioning, essentially there was a OV _ Alexi analyze why Sporting Lisbon fans want him sold. Why do we think they want him sold?
I think they want money. And I think that, they look at, in terms of having a back line, they have a strong back line as well. So they look at basically an asset that they could probably make a lot of money on and be able to reinvest in the squad without hurting the overall dynamic of their team more. I definitely think that the role of his switch, again, I must say, like Ruben Amorim has changed him more into a wide right center back that does need to advance higher. It's more of a Ben White role as opposed to it being a traditional right center back that's deep. And he struggles in terms of his crossing variety there. So I think a little bit is recency bias, because you asked that poll 6 months ago, then they're saying hell no. And in fact, Sporting are saying hell no. And they did so by adding a release clause of £69 million when they already had a £45 million release clause. They increased it in 6 months. So a lot of this is recency bias for me. And again, also, Sporting fans likely want to reinvest and kind of reallocate funds where they already feel strong. I mean, us Arsenal fans are probably saying, do we need to buy this type of player when we're so strong defensively? Should we allocate those funds differently? And I think very similarly, Sporting are thinking, hey, I'd rather not lose Gyökeres, who I don't have a striker for, and rather sell Diomande for £69 million
Yep.
as opposed to Gyökeres for 85
Yeah.
and reinvest that in the squad.
Especially when they have is his name Inacio? I think his name is
Yeah,
also quite highly rated and so on and so
very.
forth. So yeah. There was also a question from Michael Clark who said, curious to know, Michael A.R. Clark on X, who says, curious to know what the story was at AFCON. Didn't seem to play much, and when he did, it didn't seem to stand out much.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, he's kind of very young to that Ivory Coast team, and I think he really got his debut last year, roughly, but he hasn't established himself at international level. I'd probably retort, how is Saliba faring at Deschamps? International football is not a measure of quality and ability talent, I think. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's I can't speak for why the politics and the coach are, but I don't think it speaks less to the talent of the player.
Yeah. No, yeah, the Saliba point is a good one. Let's just sum him up then. Uh, let's just do negatives first because there's not loads, but there are some in terms of some of his aerial capacity, especially dealing with balls from out wide. Some question marks over his when he's pulled out wide or when he's used out wide in terms of does he have the same level of authority? Not quite.
Yeah.
Some rashness as well. He's 20 years old. He's 20. You know, he's going to make mistakes. He doesn't get every single action correct. But in terms of the positives and what we like in the player, jump in when you want to. But, you know, in terms of the tempo on the passing, in terms of his authority as a central centre back, in terms of the variety and the sort of dexterousness, I would say, on the ball, and how he passes, the physical profiles. He's great at defending at the shoulder, the controlled aggression, the timing of when he goes into the acceleration, which you were pointing out brilliantly. There's so much to like. So yeah, really good player. Let us know what you think of Diomande down in the comments. We've got a live Q&A on Friday for patrons and YouTube members, which you can check out if you would like to. But you can also check out the scouting on there, which will be from the link in the description to get more clips of Diomande. Let us know who else you'd like us to scout in the comments. Subscribe to the Cannon Podcast, and we'll see you very, very soon. Up the Arsenal.
Peace.
That can't be the sign-off.